I think that when we were making films before, look, I think that this film, I think that a number of the films from back then were really coming out of activism. I think that there was really like, so many of the people were like Go Fish came out of activism. It was just, I think that this film Stonewall came out of activism. That was sort of like we've had this sort of collective. We must do these things for the good of all. That sort of has fallen apart a little bit. We've gotten a little bit more individual, I think, over the decades, and we also have learned the business of film. And when we were doing these films, we weren't talking about like where we're going to launch, what's our audience going to be, we were just really kind of making our work because we wanted to make work. So that has shifted. That has shifted. We're all very aware of our sort of to be looked at-ness now, I think, what our audience is going to be. But I also think that there are things that we're almost able to make a film for as much money as we were able to do it then, at this point, which is really an incredible thing, And I think that it creates sustainable careers for filmmakers now, that we can make a movie for, $300,000. $200,000, and that they're actually really pretty good.
It's also interesting when you say that we didn't look at the film in terms of the box office, but I also think that there was a narrower gap between the art world and the film world.
Yeah, I think so.
And I
yes,
think that's why
they were very distinct. Like there was the sort of the dissolution of independent filmmaking, right? And now we're calling kind of these low, tiny budget films independent film. Are they the same as is it the same sort of model as it used to be? In a way, it bears a resemblance, but it definitely has a much more business savvy head on it.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, I know that you said Wojnarowicz died 2 years before this. Was there any?
Yeah, 92.
Okay, did he have any involvement in the pre-production or?
That's a great question.
No, I think he had met with Steve, the director, but no, not involvement in the script.
So Steve knew that he was making it, and he met with David prior.
I think so. He
Wow.
got permission from him. And
there's a lot. There's 4 or 5 books of David's writings available. Close to the Knives being one, and another being the Waterfront Journals.
Close to the Knives is what this is based on, and the second one was
Postcards from America, X-Rays
Yeah.
from Hell.
Yeah.
And
so those
they're
are
also
the two.
many of them are formed in monologue form. So it's interesting to see the use of the monologue here because that was also how David wrote a lot of the pieces. So.
Very cool.
I was wondering, was it a deliberate choice not to use any of his artwork, or was there some dispute with the estate?
I don't remember, but I don't think there was. I think it was just more that it was about his life and about his story and his trials and tribulations versus his artwork.
You did have some paintbrushes in the sink. I'm just gonna say, there was a nod to it all. So. I was waiting for like the camera to come back and see the big artwork that was on his apartment wall or something, at one point when he was in that doorway, I was just like, oh wow, I thought we were gonna come back. I mean, I remember that it didn't have any of his artwork in it.
What was the screening history of the film until now?
Screening history of the film until now.
Festivals and played in New York in '94 and DVD release, video release. I think that's about it. But it was in the Sundance Film Festival, Berlin, Toronto. I can't think of the other festivals, but it's been around.
I found there's a big kind of connection both with theater and sort of the monologue sort of form that you were talking about. That also it takes this form of almost like you could see it as a stage show or something like that, with just monologues, and also that it has definitely a big connection to the person thanked in the credits, which is Derek Jarman, and the way his sort of biographical portraits. I mean, I'm assuming that was, you guys would have all been very influenced by those films,
oh, yeah.
right?
Well, Derek was, that was right after Edward II, and a lot of his films were very in the realm, and Stephen being English, I think, was more influenced by him.
Yeah, I mean, Tom Kalin in Swoon was influenced by Derek.
Of course.
And at the same time was like the one time that I got to meet Derek Jarman before he died, which was really an honor.
Yeah.
Thank you for selecting this film. It's awesome. I'm obviously thinking that the 25th anniversary of ACT UP is coming up, and there's going to be a big event on April 25th. And so I'm thinking about nostalgia and the power of nostalgia, and I wonder, we can dismiss nostalgia, but I wonder if you want to talk about the potential of nostalgia as well to be informative or inspiring.
I personally think nostalgia gets sort of a little bit of a bad rap. It turns like what you sort of like, it's like this twee thing, like, it's like what old people do. But I think that there's power in nostalgia. It reminds you of where you came from and who you are. And sometimes you need a good kick in the butt by nostalgia. Maybe nostalgia's like got big boots and big muscles. I'd like to think about it that way, because sometimes we've gotten a little cushy.
I guess nostalgia to me becomes dangerous when it seems to be always put in the past. So memory and remembering are other terms that are maybe more active. Nostalgia seems to be about some sort of longing for the past, which is not a particularly active position. So maybe it's just how you interpret that feeling of connection to something that's from the past that incites.
Well, I'm always hoping I will time travel. So I know. I'm pretty into nostalgia.
It's when it doesn't involve cocaine that you just really, it's better. Down that road.
In the back, yes.
I saw the film probably shortly after it was released in San Francisco, and for those people who are not old enough to remember that time, people were still dying very frequently of HIV. It was a little bit on the downslope, but the HIV message of the film, which might be a little bit subsumed by the violence of the film, was very, very powerful at that time, and it was a powerful experience for me and my friends who were involved in that.
I mean, for me, I just sat there looking at Jim and being like, here's an HIV positive man playing a man who's already died. And that to me, and who would later die, and that to me is just like, I don't know, like, I was just like staring at him like, what was he thinking while he was playing this part,
In the same way David was writing things about HIV and AIDS and the death of his lover, Peter Hujar, who's played by Tom Gilroy in the film, right as it was happening. And he was able to have the distance to create art around those emotions and those experiences is pretty just sort of shockingly brave, I think. Most of us would run away from trying to witness that to the point that he did. I worked on Long Time Companion, which was in '89, and was also one of the early films about AIDS, and the director, Norman Renee, died about 4 years after the filming of that film of AIDS, and was sick on set, and was not publicly out at the time as a person with HIV, but a lot of people who worked on that film, and this as well, died.
And also Stonewall came right after this, right? Yeah, and he died right before the film was, well, then they were in post-production.
Yeah.
I mean, this was like, it was all, I think we always want to think like, oh, that was done in in the 80s, and it's like, I look at this film and I'm like reminded that no, it's not done now, it's not, it's something that is still going on. I think we sort of see it as something in the past, and
when you ask the question about nostalgia, when you think about something like Douglas Kremp, who was one of our artists here at Queer Art Film, wrote an essay called Mourning and Militancy. So how do you bring those two things together, and I think this film, I believe that it now reads as much more political than you say it was interpreted at the time. It seems like we don't have films that are trying to question America to the extent, and the roots of violence in America and homophobia.
And our own, uncaring about other people and
Yeah.
violence towards other people,
It
yeah.
seems kind of radical in a certain
yeah,
way.
and his stepping out and really being like, I have no place in this, like really, I mean, the film is so from an outsider's perspective.
I'm curious for the audience of people under the age of 30, if anyone has a comment who maybe has never seen the film, or how it strikes people from a generation. Adam is my half a generation from us. But in
31
terms of
tomorrow.
seeing it does. So, I mean, if anyone, yeah.
I would just say in terms of nostalgia, for those of us who've read the book, who were kids during the time it was written, it's sort of more of a learning experience and sort of a way to see how far we've come and to be grateful for kind of the situation we have now. It was sort of a big kick in the butt when I read it, and it was very emotional at the time for what I missed, thankfully. So it's not nostalgia.
I think it's really exciting to watch this film and the other films that are coming out at the same time, because it is this like fantastic narrative filmmaking, experimental film, a lot of the theory that was going on and being talked about at the time, and the art world that was very much involved with all of this. I mean, do you want to talk about the way in which filmmaking was done at that period, with regards to politics and that kind of slippage in between? I mean, we don't really have a cinema that blends all of those forms like that right now, and is so fiercely, anti-normative and working against,
I think that there was something, I mean, first I think that there was a lot of like theory that, everybody was like, kind of into at that time. And Go Fish being a sort of an experimental narrative as well, even though there's a really kind of like pedestrian kind of, lighthearted love story in there, it still had like all these elements. And I myself was very influenced by Todd Haynes. I remember going to see Poison, and the original way that Go Fish was structured was that it was a documentary portion, a fictional portion, and an experimental portion. And along the way, after Christine got involved, she was just like, you got to get rid of that documentary shit. And so it's like, so it's just like, that's why that was the only color section in the film. The documentary part was color, the narrative was like, but I think that we kind of, I think that there were a lot of filmmakers that we were already on the outside, I think, as queer filmmakers. And I think that there was more of like embracing, I don't know if you agree, but I think that there was more like embracing like, hell, if we're already out here anyway, why should we try to be, in the mainstream? So I think that, people were making, we were already on the outside, I think, as queer filmmakers. And I think that there was more of like embracing, I don't know if you agree, but I think that there was more like embracing like, hell, if we're already out here anyway, why should we try to be, in the mainstream? So I think that, people were making, there's a lot of amazing experimental gay filmmakers. I mean, just in our camp.